As NFL Draft Day quickly approaches, could the Cowboys be in position to pick the best defensive player in this draft? We explore next on The Blitz. And welcome to the Blitz, your Dallas Cowboys report. Bill Jones along with Kyle Youmans here at the Star in Frisco, 2.5 weeks away from NFL Draft Day. I thought you might wear a green jacket today since it's Masters weekend. And also because this guy, Kyle Youmans, I recall a couple of weeks ago back in mid-March here on the Blitz, you were sporting green because of the mean green in March Madness, and I think you picked the Baylor Bears to win it all, didn't you?
How about that? Isn't that right? I didn't even have to go clip it. I should have talked to Caden, our producer in the back, about maybe going and cutting that as a piece of audio. I didn't need it because I've got Bill Jones in that memory of yours.
I remember that. All right, and I've got, let me get it out here, my big green NFL draft scouting notebook, right. And over the course of the next half hour, we're talking draft. But let's also talk about what the Cowboys are doing in free agency, leading up, getting this team situated to where they go into the draft and they don't have urgent positions of need and they can be true to their board. Let's talk about what happened this past week, and let's start with the tight end Jeremy Sprinkles, who of course Sprinkle out of Arkansas, who was with Washington, a draft pick 4 years ago, and of course Blake Bell is not coming back. He signed with his old team Kansas City. Just they're adding to the depth at that position.
No doubt about it. And you've got your top two guys whenever it comes to Blake Jarwin and of course Dalton Schultz after the year that he had in 2020. But overall, the tight end position looking pretty good. That was the replacement for Blake Bell, is what Jeremy Sprinkle brings in, a former fifth-round pick out of Arkansas. Never really emerged as a pass catcher, but he was solid in the blocking game, especially in the run game. Somebody who I think the Cowboys can kind of rely on in some of those heavy packages, maybe at the line of at the goal line, to try and find their way to get a couple extra yards for Ezekiel Elliott. He's a guy that can put maybe even as an up back, almost in a fullback sort of role, to find a way to block in front.
Right, in training camp, we'll also keep our eye on Sean McCann out of Michigan, the undrafted player last year the coaches were high on after last season. All right, how about the way the Cowboys have approached special teams here in the offseason? And they sign a Brian Anger, who is a former third-round draft pick, who was let go in he was what you call a salary cap casualty with the Houston Texans. And we've got competition at the punter position now. Hunter Nicewander did a nice job the last half of last year.
Yeah, this was a surprising addition, I think, for the Cowboys this week. The fact that Hunter Nicewander had the season that he did a year ago. You go out and get an 8-year veteran in Brian Anger, who led the NFL in punting yards back in 2013. Somebody who kind of fills that Chris Jones role as maybe a veteran in the special teams room, but not necessarily the front runner whenever it comes to the punting job. I think Hunter Nicewander did such a nice job last year coming in spot duty after coming out of the XFL. And you looked at the way that he kind of took over in Chris Jones' absence. It was one of the reasons why Chris Jones isn't on the roster anymore, is because of the year that Nicewander had, and I expect him still to be the front runner for the punter spot as we head into training camp.
All right, those are some of the news tidbits from the past week here at the Star. They have been hard at work behind the scenes here as they get ready for the draft. And when we come back in a moment here on the Blitz, maybe the Cowboys can draft the top defensive player in this draft. And could it be a linebacker?
The Dallas Cowboys Blitz is brought to you by AT&T, the official 5G innovation partner of the Dallas Cowboys. And by the Dallas Cowboys Football Club. Tour AT&T Stadium, the home of the Dallas Cowboys. Tours are available daily. For details, visit attstadium.com/tours. This segment is brought to you by AT&T, the official 5G innovation partner of the Dallas Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Blitz, your Dallas Cowboys report. Bill Jones now joined by Mickey Spagnola of DallasCowboys.com as we Oh, 2.5 weeks away from the draft. Let's take a look at a position group of interest leading into this draft. Cowboys, of course, with the 10th pick. It's very interesting the way things might be shaping up with all the offensive players taken in the top 9 picks. Cowboys could have the pick of the defensive litter at number 10.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you look at all the quarterbacks that might go on, a couple offensive tackles, Bill, a couple wide receivers, when they get to 10, you may have the pick of the best defensive player. And my question is, I know everybody's kind of pointing at the cornerback position, but what if the best defensive player in the draft is a linebacker? Do the Cowboys have a need at linebacker? I think absolutely. If you look at Leighton Vander Esch going into his 4th season, on May 3rd, the Cowboys have to decide if they're going to pick up his 5th-year option. And then you have Jalen Smith, and I understand that he led the team the last 2 years in tackles, but I don't know that he's that weak side linebacker. So if a linebacker is the best defensive player in the draft, would you do it? And there's a couple top guys, Bill, that could fit that bill and may drop to 10 for the Cowboys.
Before we get into those top guys, though, but the top guy, if you're taking a linebacker at number 10 in the draft, he's obviously playing right away. But if you've got Vander Esch and Jalen Smith, they're playing, obviously, but you do have the Sam linebacker position in sub packages.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, if they're going to play a 4-3, a true 4-3, instead of like last year and play nickel all the time, you need a third linebacker. And if you look at it, you got Vander Esch, you got Jalen Smith, and who? Right?
Yep.
So there's room for a linebacker, and a linebacker can play on that weak side that can not only have instincts against the run, but can run well enough to cover and also blitz, and there's some guys that fit that bill.
Yeah, and Keanu Neal signing free agency, going to start with the linebacker group. We'll see how he's
And he's
used.
only on a 1-year deal.
That's right. Okay, but this is more than about this year. It's the next 5 years when you're talking first rounder. Micah Parsons, linebacker from Penn State. He's a first rounder, and Mickey smiles when I mention the name Micah Parsons.
Because Bill knows that he's a favorite of mine, just watching him, what he did in 2 years at Penn State. And he's that guy that can be a move linebacker. He can play all 3 downs. He's just awfully dynamic as a linebacker and can play a lot of different spots for you, but he can bestly play on the nickel for you, dropping coverage, blitz, and awfully good against the run.
And when I look at my Big Green NFL Draft Scouting Notebook, I have 4.39 40
Yes.
at his pro day and other measurables that are off the charts for Micah Parsons. Now, he in high school was a defensive end.
And a running back, I
And a
think.
running back, an edge rusher type. So he goes from the front of the defense to linebacker in college. Here's a guy, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah from Notre Dame, who's more of a safety who became a linebacker. And you talk about a guy who can lay a lick on a running back or a receiver, this guy can.
And don't let the 6'1", 221 be deceptive, because this guy can put on 10 pounds easily and be that weak side linebacker. He's a guy that can play all 3 downs also, can run. I just think, I saw a quote from Jim Mora Jr., the former NFL head coach, and he said the teams that pass on him will regret it.
Well, and let me give you one more guy, Zaven Collins from Tulsa. This is a 6'5", 260-pound linebacker who won virtually every defensive award that you can win nationally at Tulsa last year.
And as I told you earlier when we did mix shots on our podcast, he's a Rolando McClain starter kit.
Well, and I'm wondering if he can be an edge rusher too, and sort of a Randy Gregory starter kit at 6'5", 260 pounds. All right. Mickey Spagnola, we appreciate it. And the Blitz continues in just a moment. Let's take a look at the quarterback position. Where does Garrett Gilbert and the rest of the quarterbacks fit in 2021?
This segment was brought to you by AT&T, the official 5G innovation partner of the Dallas Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Blitz. Bill Jones with Kyle Youmans. The Cowboys, I think they're pretty set with the quarterback position. Wouldn't you say?
You would think so.
Yeah.
It's the most expensive quarterback contract in NFL history, would say.
I think they're set with Dak. But what about the backup to Dak Prescott? Let's start with Garrett Gilbert. Garrett Gilbert, in one game last year against the Pittsburgh Steelers, he played very well.
Yeah, you look at the stat line below and you talk about the 1 touchdown, 1 interception, and really in spot duty in Week 9 against, at that point, an undefeated Pittsburgh team. It was a start that Garrett Gilbert didn't necessarily know about until the week prior, and he came in and played admirably, I think, whenever it looked at the expectations that were around him as not playing in almost 2 years and then finally getting a chance to show his stuff. He gave the Cowboys a chance to win, which I think that's what the expectation was to keep them in the game against a really good Steelers team and then find a way to give them a chance to win. But is he ready for multiple weeks? I think that's the question that this front office really has to get into over the next couple of weeks when they're looking at the backup quarterback spot, because if Gilbert isn't the guy, you're going to have to go out and find one.
Right, and of course Andy Dalton has moved on to Chicago, where they say he's going to be the starting quarterback for the Bears. So what about the veterans still out there in free agency? We're showing Alex Smith, the formerly of the Washington football team. What do you think of him?
I think it's a good reason that we're showing Alex Smith. Played 8 games last year, battling that compound fracture that pretty much the majority of the league knows about. Comeback player of the year in the NFL, and somebody who could really mentor Dak Prescott, I think, in coming back from the injury. Now, Dak's injury not nearly as severe as what Alex Smith had to go through, but he's somebody who is a veteran leader who has won pretty much everywhere he's been, led the Washington football team in an undersung roster to an NFC East title a year ago. Even in his 8 games, passed for just about 1,600 yards and 6 touchdowns in his return. I think he would be the perfect fit contract-wise and also just leadership-wise to come into this quarterback room.
And, of course, he also has a history with Mike McCarthy, who was the offensive coordinator at San Francisco when Alex Smith was the number 1 pick in the draft back 15 years ago now. I'll throw another name out there, A.J. Mccarron, former quarterback at Alabama, who the quarterback's coach for the Cowboys, Doug Nussmeier, has a history with. Of course, he was the OC at Alabama when A.J. Mccarron was in college. Okay, what about guys in this draft? There's going to be a run on quarterbacks at the top of the draft. Will that slide down some other quarterbacks who the Cowboys might be interested in later in the draft?
I absolutely think it will slide quarterbacks down, because we've never really seen a draft class that's going to see as high of a quarterback run as we will here in 2021. The first 4 picks very well could be quarterbacks, and then after that, there's a slew of guys that the Cowboys could look at in the middle rounds. How about Ian Book out of Notre Dame? Of course, led the Fighting Irish to a college football playoff appearance, a 3-year starter with Notre Dame. I think Kyle Trask is another guy who, in those middle rounds, who was a Heisman finalist a year ago, really saw his stock fall after battling some injuries in the SEC championship game and then in the blowout loss in the Cotton Bowl at AT&T Stadium to Oklahoma. Then you're looking at highlights from Felipe Franks, a guy who, at least at Arkansas, really found his stride in the SEC and gave the Razorbacks one of the better seasons that they've seen over the last couple of years. And while we're talking about the SEC, Kyle Trask, Felipe Franks, Kellen Mond, just down the road in College Station, about 3 hours from where we sit right now. He had a fantastic season, led Texas A&M to the number 5 ranking in the college football playoff rankings, and overall a great season from him, and really showed what he can do with a good offensive line.
We're showing Sam Ehlinger there as well. Ehlinger is going to be interesting because he has those intangibles you look for in a quarterback. I think he's going to stick in some capacity with an NFL team, but it would be a late round at best.
Well, and that's the big thing about Sam Ehlinger is he's not looking to be a starter. He's got those backup quarterback intangibles that could keep him around for quite some time. I mean, we've seen it with guys like Garrett Gilbert even. I mean, this is a guy who came into the NFL with low expectations, but has since made a pretty good career out of things like that. A.J. Mccarron, a guy you talked about earlier as well in the segment. I think these are guys that could potentially have long careers in the NFL as a backup because there's a role for that. And Ehlinger's another one of those.
All right, when we come back here on the Blitz, let's go around the rest of the NFC East. And yes, there will be some wide receivers taken early, might be by some of those NFC East teams. With draft day approaching, we explore not only the Cowboys, but the rest of the NFC East. Cowboys pick at number 10 in the first round. How about the rest of the National Football Conference Eastern Division? A run of NFC East teams as the Cowboys pick at 10 and then the Giants at 11, the Eagles at 12, Washington at 19. You see some of the draft needs. Kyle Youmans, as far as the NFL Network, that's what they think these teams' needs are. What do you think?
I think it's pretty close to what these three teams have, but I think we're going to see a run of wide receivers at 11 and 12.
How about the Giants with a wide receiver?
Exactly. I think whenever the Giants come to the table at 11, there's going to be a really good chance that one of the top two wide receivers, maybe top two out of the three wide receivers in the draft, are going to be available, and that's Jalen Waddle and Davonte Smith. Of course, Smith being the Heisman Trophy winner, Waddle his teammate who may be better, may be more talented whenever it comes to the NFL. One of those two guys is going to fall out of the top 10, I think, and I think the Giants are going to sit in the sweet spot to try and pick one of those guys up. We saw a wide receiver run just outside the top 10 in the 2020 draft. I think we can see the same thing in 2021 in the Giants to try and give somebody for Daniel Jones to throw to, for Saquon Barkley to maybe take a little pressure off of him out of the backfield, and then also to complement the signing of Galladay. I think that's really the great move for the Giants overall, because these are two very, very talented wide receivers, and I know the Cowboys are worried about going up against them in the future.
Yeah, the Giants signed Kenny Galladay in free agency. What about the Eagles, who traded back from 6 to number 12? What do you think they have in their mind?
I think they have a lot on their mind whenever it comes to the Eagles, because like you said, started off at 6. They thought about trading up to pick number 3, but only if Zach Wilson was going to be there, the BYU quarterback. They instead elected to go back outside of the top 10, pick up an extra pick from Miami, which will benefit them in the future. But right now, it puts them in a spot once again for a pass catcher. And I think they could go a number of different ways at this position, because you could look at one of the leftover wide receivers, whoever the Giants don't ultimately end up taking, or you can even look to the defensive side of the football and pick up a guy like Micah Parsons or a Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. You could have whoever is left over at offensive tackle. There are a lot of different needs, I think, that the Philadelphia Eagles are going to look at. J.C. Horn could potentially be in that conversation. So being at 12 doesn't necessarily benefit them as an elite player that they're going to pick up, but it's still somebody that's going to make their football team better.
All right, and then Washington at number 19 in free agency. They signed Ryan Fitzpatrick. Obviously, he is not their quarterback of the future, might be of the immediate present, but how about them trading up to get one of those top quarterbacks? It would be a long way to trade.
Yeah, they would probably have to get up to maybe number 6, number 7, number 8, try and trade with one of those teams that doesn't necessarily need a quarterback. I think the sweet spot would probably be Detroit at 7. They would have to go up and find a way to make a deal with the Lions, who of course just traded for Jared Goff. But Ryan Fitzpatrick, like you said, is not the future. One of these three quarterbacks, Trey Lance from North Dakota State, Mac Jones from Alabama, Justin Fields from Ohio State, whoever is not selected by San Francisco at the 3rd overall pick, they're going to be available in that top 10. It's whether or not Washington thinks one of those guys is worth the haul to get up into the top 10 and potentially find their quarterback of the future to groom behind Ryan Fitzpatrick. He's certainly been a great bridge quarterback for other young quarterbacks in the past.
All right, we still have time left here on the Blitz. When we come back, we will tell you the place you need to go to find out about all the prospects in this NFL draft.
The Dallas Cowboys Blitz was brought to you by AT&T, the official 5G innovation partner of the Dallas Cowboys, and by the Dallas Cowboys Football Club. Tour AT&T Stadium, the home of the Dallas Cowboys. Tours are available daily. For details, visit attstadium.com/tours.
Closing in on a couple weeks till the 2021 NFL Draft. We've talked a lot about draft prospects during this edition of the Blitz, but you can learn more about over 350 collegiate players with the 2021 Dallas Cowboys Star Magazine Draft Guide. You can go online, pick up a physical copy or a digital copy from DallasCowboys.com/star to pick up your copy today. I was a part of this. We had a ton of DallasCowboys.com writers on this. It was a ton of fun to put together, but I will say huge credit to the Star Magazine Draft Guide team because it is a fantastic looking magazine.
All right, I've got a question for you as far as linebackers. Earlier in the show, we talked about linebackers. Is there a linebacker that you like for the Cowboys in the second or third round?
Absolutely. I think there's a couple guys you could look at in that realm, but one guy that continues to stick out to me is Jamin Davis, linebacker out of Kentucky. He's an athletic freak whenever it comes to the numbers he put up on his pro day. Fantastic player off the ball, somebody who I think could add some depth from the linebacker spot and even challenge a little bit for a starting gig. I think he's somebody that this coaching staff is infatuated with the front office as well. A late riser up draft boards. I didn't even have a scouting report on him.
Yeah, 4.3740 for Jamin Davis of Kentucky. We talk more draft next week here on The Blitz, your Dallas Cowboys report.